gentlemen, welcome to Jewpernatural Lesson 1. Today we will be tackling dreams and direction. When should we follow our dreams? When do we say it's just a dream? Let's explore where inspiration from a lifelike dream can take us. And plus, probably most importantly for today, we will have a takeaway from today's lesson. If you have your book, you should also have received one of these, and we are going to talk more about that at the end of today's lesson. We are, of course, on page 1 of our textbooks, and I'd like to begin by introducing the course. Human beings have forever been fascinated by the mysterious, that which lies beyond the realm of the natural and rational world that we spend most of our time hanging around in. As modern science advances and our understanding of the natural world deepens, in other words, as we begin to understand more about things we possibly didn't understand in the past, our fascination with the things we don't understand today only seems to grow. The meaning of dreams, predictive powers of the stars, the power of the evil eye, what in Hebrew is known as ayin hara, the existence of otherworldly spirits, angels, demons, extraterrestrials, is there some form of planetary life outside of Earth? These questions have forever inspired curiosity, sometimes mockery, and at other times emotional reactions such as fear or dread or the like. On page 2, you're presented with a figure which I found very fascinating, and that is it's tracking. This is based on the Pew Research Center's October 2018 research study, and it's essentially tracking, hold on just a moment, there we go. It's essentially tracking the belief in the paranormal phenomena among US adults, right? So what they did was they asked 4 questions. What percentage of people believe in these 4 phenomena? And then what they did was they took them together, and it turns out that belief in at least of one of these 4 entities above is actually common among at least 62% of those that were surveyed. This similar was found in British adults, similar ideas, different study, different topics, but you see the numbers are quite similar. Same thing was done by Canadians. I don't want to get too exhaustive here, so I'm just kind of running through them quickly. But I think what most of this points to is that not only is belief in some form of paranormal common, but it's actually growing. And perhaps most important for me, and I would hope this is also the way most of you come to this topic, is the following. To me, and I'll speak from my own beliefs. As a religious Jew, to me, it's undoubtedly true that there are things that exist out there that are beyond my regular 5 senses perception. I'll point to certain ones that I will readily admit to believing in. Things like the soul, things like God, of course, things like spirituality and spiritual energies, energy to days, energy to certain places, etc. To me, it's not even so much of an extension beyond believing in thoughts and believing in emotions. In other words, just because I cannot sense emotion from someone else or from myself, with my touch, with my taste, with my sight, with my hearing, etc., just because I can't sense it with my normal sensors doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Now, emotions and thoughts are the easiest ones. Why? Because emotions and thoughts are something that I can sense symptoms of them, reactions of them, right? So without knowing that they exist, like a doctor diagnoses symptoms without knowing what's going on inside before an x-ray or the like, right? I can sense that these things exist. To me, that extends to things like spirituality and the soul and God. In other words, I might not be able to physically tell you, oh, this is what God looks like, or this is what the soul sounds like, but I have enough of a sense that they exist based on symptoms that they exhibit in my life. Finding myself in such a situation, I often find myself asking a simple question. Why is it such a huge stretch to say the same is true for, let's say, the power of dreams over our life? Ghosts, demons, angels, what exactly is the major jump there? If you already believe in the existence, that there are things beyond the things we can sense with our normal sensors, so then it's not such a huge stretch to say that these other things believe. Yet, and this is where I'll pause and play kind of the other side. I think it would be foolish to say that I believed in all of them. Not just because I believe in a soul does that mean that I believe in Bigfoot, right? And not just because I believe in spirituality does that also mean that I believe in ghosts, right? So this is kind of the place where we find ourselves as we enter this course. Kind of like, I know there's more to life than just my physical body and more than meets the eye, but how much more? And kind of sort through some of the things we've heard of, especially the more popular ones, and try to separate the myth from reality. Today, in our first lesson, we will be discussing the meaning of dreams, and we have a wonderful class video which is going to set the stage for today's lesson. It takes us all the way back to my favorite steamship, the Titanic. Bye-bye.
900 feet long, 175 feet from keel to funnel, bearing over 2,000 souls, including several of the world's wealthiest. Experts had crowned it the unsinkable, and it was making good time on its maiden voyage. One Jewish man, though, battled a feeling of unease. Isaac Frauenthal was born in Pennsylvania in October 1868, on the Jewish festival of Hoshana Rabbah, meaning Great Salvation. He opened a law practice in New York, and in March 1912, he traveled to Nice, France, to attend his brother Henry's wedding to Clara Rogers. The newlyweds journeyed on to the English port city of Southampton to ride the luxurious Titanic back to New York. And why not? A new life, a new ship, a liner predicted to live happily ever after. Isaac chose a scenic route through France, boarding the Titanic at Cherbourg the day after Passover. He paid today's equivalent of $4,000 for a first-class ticket. But he was jittery. Days earlier, he had an awful dream. He saw himself aboard a colossal steamship that crashed headlong into something large and began to sink beneath the waves. He awoke shaken, but dismissed the dream because he believed neither in dreams nor the supernatural. The night before boarding, his dream reoccurred. An oceanic collision, helplessly sinking. Escape, escape. But the sun rose, and so did he. A lot less certain than before. Was there anything to this? Should he board the Titanic? Should he share his dream? No, they would mock him. The ship was unsinkable. Isaac quietly boarded the Titan of the sea, but he later found a moment to share his fearful vision. As expected, he was roundly ridiculed. Until 4 nights later, when, at 11:40 on April 14th, the ship's lookout spotted a colossal iceberg dead ahead. The Titanic reversed its mighty engines and lurched to the left, but its starboard was lacerated. Ice tore into steel, and water dragged the ship's throat downwards. Isaac heard the captain express terror and ran to rouse Henry and Clara. Too many passengers refused to abandon ship at midnight, unable to believe that a lifeboat was safer than an Olympic liner. But Isaac had seen this vessel sink twice already. As he rolled into a lifeboat, he said, "Well, Henry, I wasn't so foolish, was I?" Henry wasn't sure. Surely such an engineering wonder could remain afloat until it could be repaired or towed. But the Titanic's stern rose into the air with hundreds clinging on. Snapping clean in two, the vessel plunged into the eternal silence of a bottomless ocean. 1,500 souls were lost. A nightmare, a reality, in the heart of the night. One sunrise and 6 hours later, Isaac was hoisted aboard the Carpathia, which sailed on to New York. He no longer doubted that something had forewarned him about the disaster. Isaac Frauenthal dismissed his disturbing dreams and sailed aboard the Titanic. If you had been in his position, would you have done the same?
Isaac Frauenthal's story is, of course, the topic of text 1. But I'd like to move on to page 5, where the textbook asks a very simple question of us. And that is, if you had, this question actually is not the most important one. If you had been in Isaac Frauenthal's position, would you have boarded the Titanic? I'm not so curious about that. I'm much more curious about the follow-up question. And it's such a personal question that I'd like you all to take a moment to answer it to yourselves. I'm not going to ask for your responses, but think for a moment, have you ever had a dream that seemed so real to you? And if yes, how did you respond to it? And perhaps setting the stage for the whole lesson today, what criteria did you use at the time, or do you consistently use to decide whether you take a dream seriously or not? Okay, so these are some very personal questions. I would encourage you to think about them now. We'll give a minute and write down your responses. The reason I think it's so important is because I think most of us have a complex relationship with dreams. I think we have had dreams that felt real and that felt like some sort of communication or the like, some sort of forewarning, you know. And yet I think probably most of the time, most of our dreams are they're just gibberish. They're entertainment. They're like a movie that we watched that there's obviously no communication, but we don't place that much weight in it. And I think this is nowhere more evident than in the language that we use about dreams, right? If someone tells me you're dreaming, it means they're regarding what I said as some sort of far off, almost certainly not going to be a reality. And yet at the same time, when we want to talk about our ideas that we have for the future, the things that we would like to make a reality, we talk about them as dreams, right? Martin Luther King famously, I have a dream, right? In other words, we talk about the future as a dream that we'd like to bring into reality. So we use the word dream in conflicting ways. What we'd like to try to do today is figure out if there's a way to navigate this sort of uncertainty that there is about dreams. Is there a way to know which dreams, you know, sort the myth, the ridiculousness from the reality? And perhaps most importantly, can we learn to interpret the meaning of our dreams? Right? What about nightmares? When should they be taken seriously as some form of a warning, and when should they be more of just dismiss it as your imagination? So if you turn to page 6, we are going to open with a little overview of dreams in the book of Genesis. The book of Genesis, in general, the Bible is full of dreams, but particularly in the book of Genesis, we get some of the most prominent dreams. Some of these you'll be familiar with, some of them not. Avimelech has a dream as he's considering what he may or may not have been aware was a rape of Sarah, Abraham's wife. Laban has a dream the night before he encounters Jacob. Laban is, of course, the mother of Rachel and Leah, Jacob's 2 wives that were sisters, his uncle. And before he approaches Jacob, after Jacob had left his house, he has a dream that he should not harm Jacob. All of these are mentioned explicitly in the Torah. The Torah tells us clearly about them. Jacob himself has a dream, the most famous dream, right? The ladder whose legs are on the ground and the head reaches the heavens, and there are angels that are climbing up and down. And then finally, the most prominent parsha of dreams is when we get to Joseph and Pharaoh. Joseph himself is a dreamer. Joseph interprets Pharaoh's dreams, and this is where I'd like to begin our conversation today. Pharaoh has the Torah tells us in Parashat Miketz that Pharaoh has a dream. What? Oh, I'm sorry. I thought my slides were open. Hold on. The Torah tells us that Pharaoh has a dream. And in that dream, he has a double dream, right? The first dream is, of course, where he sees 7 skinny cows swallowing 7 fat cows. And then in the second dream, he sees 7 thin ears of grain, swallowing 7 healthy ears of grain. And Pharaoh had, so tells us the Torah, a whole team of dream interpreters on staff. And yet they seemed unable to provide a satisfactory answer for him, a satisfactory interpretation of what exactly these dreams mean. And only Joseph, who's taken out of the pit, the cliche rags to riches story, Joseph comes and in his exceedingly wise and blessed with divine light, with divine insight, he's able to make sense of the dream. And I think this story highlights one of the first problems that we have with deriving meaning from dreams. In other words, on a personal level, if we have dreams that we're looking to understand to glean some sort of meaning from, the first question is, just because a certain dream may have meaning doesn't mean it's easy to figure out what the meaning of the dream is, what the interpretation of the dream is. Pharaoh seems to have had professional college graduates in dream interpretation. They majored in dream interpretation, and they didn't seem to be able to do what was needed. And Joseph, for some reason, was able to, but the Torah tells us that it was only based on divine inspiration. In addition to being a dream interpreter, of course, Joseph was also quite the dreamer himself. In fact, he's called the dreamer by his brothers. And this is how the whole story of Joseph being sold down to Egypt begins. It begins with him having 2 dreams of his own. And what is that? The Torah tells us that Joseph has a dream. He has 2 dreams, one after the other. First, he and all of his brothers are gathering wheat in the field, and all of the other bundles of wheat are bowing down to his bundle of wheat. And then the dream about the stars and the sun and the moon. In other words, he sees the sun, the moon, and 11 stars bowing down to him. His brothers become jealous, famously. What do you think? We're going to come down. We're all going to bow down to you. And this leads to the jealousy that eventually leads to the sale of Joseph's dream. The Talmud, in what is in our textbook, text 2, and Phil will ask you if you can to get us started, analyzes this dream and actually takes a lesson from Joseph's dream. Phil, when you're ready, text 2.
Rabbi Yochanan taught in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, just as there can never be wheat without chaff mixed in, so too there can never be a dream without nonsense mixed in. Rabbi Berachia taught, even though part of a dream may be fulfilled, the entirety of the dream is never fulfilled. The source for these statements is found in the story of Joseph's dreams. Joseph dreamed that the sun and the moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me, referring to his parents and 11 siblings. Yes, yet at the time of the dream, Joseph's mother was already deceased.
So Joseph has this dream of the sun, the moon, and the stars bowing down to him. And as we know, it ends up being a dream that actually foretells the future, right? Because he does indeed rise to become the viceroy of Egypt, and eventually all of his siblings come and bow down to the viceroy of Egypt, who is later revealed to be Joseph, as does Jacob, etc. But the Talmud points out something else, that even when it comes to a dream, which the Torah is telling us clearly, Joseph dreamt it, and then there was a proper interpretation of it, and indeed, it indeed did come true. Still, there was an iota of nonsense in it. Rachel never bowed down to Joseph. It wasn't entirely 100% accurate, which leads us to our second lesson from dreams in the Bible. Number 1 was, if there is an interpretation to the dream, it seems to be very difficult to glean. And number 2, so in other words, if we had to summarize it, here's how we would summarize. Number 1, some dreams are meaningful. That's very clear just from the abundance of dreams that the Torah is telling us very clearly, were communications to people for some reason, Hashem communicates the divine will to them via dreams. Okay. But number 2 that we learned from Pharaoh is that dream interpretation is not so simple. And number 3 is that dreams are never entirely accurate. Even in the most famous biblical dreams that do come true, there is a fraction of them that is inaccurate, that is not just inaccurate, but is not true, is nonsense. And you can see this in figure 1.2 on page 9 in your book. Okay. So now, where does this leave us? What I'd like to do for the next little bit is do the following. We're going to spend some time talking about the weight that dreams have in terms of them being true. Then we'll spend some time talking about how we see the falsehood and the nonsense that occurs in dreams. and then we're somehow going to try to make sense of when is what. Okay, and hopefully by the end of it, we'll have gained some insight into how we should deal with our dreams. As we move into the Talmud, there are many stories in the Talmud about sages taking dreams seriously. But in order, and by the way, a lot of them can be found. I study Talmud with various people in the community, and with one of my partners, we've been studying Talmud in Tractate Brachot. We just concluded Tractate Brachot, actually, and some of you might have seen we did a siyum, like a conclusion celebration at the Kiddush on Shabbat, maybe 2-3 months ago. Either way, towards the end of Tractate Brachot, I remember when we were doing this, the Talmud has probably 2 pages straight of different Talmudic sages who had dreams and how they took them seriously and what the interpretation was and what they did about it. But I don't know that it's that helpful for us to do that right now here in this class. More helpful, I think, would be to take a look at those same pages in Tractate Brachot, which is where text 3 comes from, and see if there are any rules we can come up with. So let's start with this rule, this guiding principle about dreams. Leah, if you can, Leah Weintraub, if you can, please. Text 3.
But I don't have anything to
Oh, right.
read.
Okay. But you have the PDF, by the way. If you'd like, you have the PDF in that email, the same email that you logged in from. Either way, we will move on for now to Tiffany. Text 3, please. Dreams and prophecy. If you can remember to unmute yourself, please.
A dream is 1/60th of prophecy.
Okay. So that's a pretty intense statement. And it definitely points towards dreams having a strong or a semblance of truth in them. Now, I just want to point something out. When the Talmud says that a dream is 1/60th of prophecy, it's not intended as like a definitive true-false ratio, right? In other words, that prophecy is always true and dreams are true 1/60th of the time. It's more meant that while prophecy is a direct and clear communication from God that is always completely fulfilled, right? A direct communication, dreams fall short on this level on all accounts. In other words, they're also communication, but they're not direct. Their meaning isn't always clear, and they aren't completely accurate. That's what we mean 1/60th of a dream. In other words, it's 100% 1/60th, as opposed to 1 out of every 60 dreams is true, or something like that. But I think the basic message we get from any comparison to prophecy is that, as a rule, dreams are serious business. We shouldn't throw them out the window. In fact, the passage we just quoted, as I mentioned, follows 2 pages in the Talmud. Take a look at page 11 and 12, this spread here. Of all these dreams that people in the Talmud had, that the rabbis in Talmudic times had, that they took seriously, and that the Talmud explains what the significance of the dream was. Here, JLI has taken the liberty of dividing them into categories for us: activities, animals, plants, and fruits. Now, while I would love to say this is the end of the lesson, just take this with you. This is your interpretation card. So if you see a cat, there's going to be a beautiful song has been composed about you. You know, like, that's not exactly the way it works. Not that we're discounting that these were actual interpretations for the dreams at the time of the Talmud and these people who dreamt them, but I think we're looking for more of guiding principles as opposed to one-offs. For an illustration of the extent to which the sages of the Talmud took dreams seriously, I want you to take a look at the following text, and Tiffany will ask you to keep reading because you had such a short one. That doesn't count. Text 4, please.
Okay, hold on. I'm looking at these pictures are nice.
I know, right?
Okay, fasting to counter a dream. Rav Yehoshua, the son of Rav Edi, visited the home of Rav Ashi. His host prepared a third-born calf and offered it to him to eat. Rav Ashi responded, "I am observing a fast." They countered, "Do you not agree with the ruling of Rav Yehuda that a person may break a self-imposed fast and repay his obligation by fasting on a different day?" Rav Ashi replied, "This is a fast due to a bad dream. Rav Bar Mechasa," I'm sorry about my pronunciation.
You're doing great.
Mechasa taught in the name of Rav Hama Bar Guria, who taught in the name of Rav that a fast nullifies the portents of a bad dream like a fire consumes flax. And Rav Hista stipulated that the fast is most effective when observed on the day of the dream. Rav Yosef added that such a fast may even be observed on Shabbat.
So let's break down, thank you, Tiffany. Let's break down some of the lessons we can take from this text, okay? Number one is that the sages of the Talmud clearly were taking a bad dream very seriously, so much so that they felt that this was foretelling bad news, and if you want to avoid it, fasting is a good idea, right? That's number one. But number two, not only was it serious enough to warrant a drastic measure such as fasting, it was so serious that it can override the mitzvah of enjoying and honoring Shabbat. As we know, especially if you've been to a Chabad rabbi's house for Shabbos, right? Shabbat is serious business. We don't fast on Shabbat. We are supposed to eat and drink and enjoy. We don't, of course, we don't work, but what are we supposed to be engaged in? One of the main things is eating and drinking. So to fast and choose to override something as important as Shabbat would be a big deal for a Talmudic sage. So clearly, a bad dream is not just imagination. But I want to point something else out. The practice of fasting in response to a dream also teaches us something else, which is that it's not a destiny. The dream isn't telling us this is for sure going to happen. The very fact that they're fasting as a way of trying to avert that result shows us that clearly it's not set in stone. Because if it was set in stone, then fasting would make no sense, right? Why would you allow a person to fast on Shabbat to try and get something away when you know this is what's happening regardless? There is a 16th century Jewish, they call him a polymath, which means that he was well versed in multiple subjects, and he has a small work, like a treatise, all about dreams. His name was Rabbi Shlomo Elmoli, and text 5, which Nicole, if we can ask you to read for us, please. You have the PDF or something, right? If you can read for us, please, text 5. He really talks about this balance of that we believe a bad dream is foretelling something negative, but that it can also be averted. Go ahead.
A person who has a bad dream should not say, "The decree has already been sealed and all hope is lost." The possibility of rectification through repentance and supplication is always available, even for the worst dream imaginable. This person should fast, repent, and pray for mercy. If one does so, God will accept the fast, repentance, and prayer, and he will cancel all negative decrees that were issued. The negative events portended. Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry. Did I bounce you up by bringing up the slide?
Yeah.
Sorry, I was getting ready for the next point. Sorry about that.
Okay. The negative events portended by the dream will be revoked swiftly, like fire consumes flax. They will be revoked completely, just as fire consumes flax completely without leaving any remnant, unlike wood, which always leaves some remnant after being burnt.
So Rabbi Elmoli, thank you, Nicole, is making a very, very straightforward point, which is he says the fire and repentance comparison. In other words, the fact that the Talmud in text, where was it? Text 4 was telling us that Tanit, or fasting, let's use fasting as, right, let's expand that to mean repentance, is as good for dreams as fire. It works as well on dreams as fire does on flax. He sees in this comparison 2 points. Number one is that it will be quickly, right? I think that's the more obvious one. Think of flax. Flax is like silk, okay? Think of a beautiful silk dress you have. If somebody were to light fire to it, 10 seconds, the whole thing is gone. It's not like wood that's gonna, it's gonna take time to eat its way through. No, 10 seconds, the whole thing is gone. But he sees a second point, which I think is very, very worth noting, which is the decree will be completely abolished, right? When fire consumes wood or consumes some other materials, food, for example, there's usually ashes, things that are left. But silk, flax, in seconds, the whole thing is gone, and there's nothing that remains. So the repentance that we can do, and by the way, this is not just a Jewish view on dreams. This is really a Jewish view on anything negative, honestly. Number one is that we can always repent. We can always avert something negative. The deal is never sealed. And number two is it can be done so swiftly and so completely that you won't even know that decree ever existed. Okay. This is where we are up until now. Now, as I mentioned to you, we're playing the two sides of the coin one at a time. Okay. What I mean by that is as follows. Up until now, if the lesson were to end now, you would be convinced, okay, this is the Jewish view on dreams. Dreams are very serious business. If you see something negative in a dream, you should start fasting, repenting, and doing whatever you can in order to avert whatever negative thing you saw in that dream. But we are now about to spend about 5-10 minutes bashing that approach completely, believe it or not, from the same section in the Talmud. Okay, so let's start all the way at the top, text 6. Same section in the Talmud. Phil, if I can ask you to read, please. Manipulating dreams.
Rabbi Shmuel Bar.
A fun story. Yeah, go ahead.
Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani taught in the name of Rabbi Yonatan, people are only shown in their dreams the products of their own thoughts. The Roman emperor once said to Rabbi Yehoshua, the son of Rabbi Hananiah, "You Jews claim to be very wise. Tell me then, what will I see in my dream tonight?" Rabbi Yehoshua replied, "You will see the Persians capture and enslave you and force you to herd pigs with a golden staff." The emperor thought about this vision all day, and at night he saw it in his dream. King Shapur once said to Shmuel, "You Jews claim to be very wise. Tell me then, what will I see in my dreams tonight?" Shmuel replied, "You will see the Romans take you captive and force you to grind date pits with a golden mill." The king thought about this vision all day, and at night he saw it in his dream.
Thank you, Phil. So in this text, the Talmud seems to almost be making fun of people who take their dreams seriously. Like, dude, dreams can be manipulated so easily, right? And you tell me, if dreams can be manipulated so easily, how much sense does it make to take them seriously? Now, this is especially true because we can all relate to this, right? You'll never dream about taking a driving test, except for the week before you take your driving test, when you're super nervous about it. You'll dream 10 times that you took the test and failed the test, right? Or occasionally, maybe if you're a very positive thinker, that you pass with flying colors, right? So we all relate with this. We all know that to a certain degree we can manipulate our own dreams, or I don't know if we've ever tried manipulating it, but we know that we dream about what we think about during the day. So it's not such a far off concept. And from planting the future, from planting future dreams in someone's mind, I want to now continue this conversation with text 7, which is from a different section of the Talmud, but also a particularly compelling dream, this time that had already occurred, and again, the dismisses it. But this one is very, very interesting for the following reason. Actually, I'll elaborate on why it's so interesting after we read it, but before we read it, let me just set something up. Meiser Sheni, which is something that's going to be discussed in this text 7, is essentially a form of tithing that was done in temple times, not every year, certain years out of the 7-year agricultural cycle. If this is too much for you, don't bother with it, it's fine. What's necessary to know is that this tithe, if you were involved in agriculture, you would have to take 10% of your crops and eat them in Jerusalem. Okay, now obviously, and that would have to be the next time you made pilgrimage to Jerusalem. Now let's say you lived in the Galilee, 3-4 hours from Jerusalem today by car, right? So back then you're talking about a day or two's journey. And it was difficult for you to be able to take your fruit every time there's a new crop, to be able to take 10% of it to Jerusalem. So what would you do? You would transfer the holiness from those fruit or vegetables, move them. In other words, it was a process by which this was done. You would transfer the holiness to money. You would then take that money with you. That money you can hold on to. You had a special box in your house, which was the Meiser Sheni tithe money. Bring it with you to Jerusalem next time you travel there, and buy fruits and vegetables there, and eat those fruits and vegetables in Jerusalem. Or buy food there. Stop into Holy Bagel in the old city, and buy yourself a good bagels and lox, cream cheese and lox sandwich, right? And eat that in Jerusalem, and you would fulfill your tithing obligation. Text 7 is a story about someone who dreamt, and as part of that dream, Meiser Sheni was involved. Elise, do you have the text?
Yes, you gave it to me last night. Here it is.
Text 7 on page 1, on page
Okay.
19, please.
All right. I'll
Treasure map.
mute my face. Okay. A person was troubled about the whereabouts of money that his deceased father left for him. He dreamed that his father told him exactly how much money it was, and where it could be found, but that it was consecrated as Maser Sheni. He went to the specified place and indeed found the specified sum of money. The sages instructed this person that the contents of the dream are irrelevant and he need not treat the money as Maser Sheni.
Okay, so a fellow has a dream, all right? And the dream says as follows: there's a treasure in place X, an inheritance from your dad, belongs to your dad. There's proof that it belongs to your dad, etc. And then the dream goes on, or his dad goes on in the dream to tell him, and that money is Meiser Sheni. In other words, you can't enjoy it. That money needs to be taken to Jerusalem. You need to buy fruits and eat them in Jerusalem. He goes to the place, finds the money in exactly the spot, with exactly the proof, and with exact everything that the dream said was true. So he assumes the rest of the dream must be true as well. So he comes to the court, and the court says, it's just a dream. We cannot change the status of money based on a dream. Enjoy it in good health. It's all yours. In other words, what's so fascinating about this particular example here is that the dream was already proven to be true, right? And yet, when it comes to halachic status, this is not a random, he's coming to the rabbis, Rabbi, tell me if it's true or not. So the rabbi's like, whatever, I don't know, whatever the rabbi's in the mood of that day. This is not some sort of, they have to make a halachic ruling. What is the legal status of the money? And it would seem that it should be Meiser Sheni based on the fact the rest of the dream was true. And yet they're saying, it's a dream, laughing it off as nonsense because it happened in a dream. So obviously the question that we land on is on page 20, which is how my texts 3 and 4, the first part of today's lesson where we built dreams up and said they're all valuable and there's a lot to take very seriously. And text 6, 7, which is the second half we just concluded, wherein we bashed and made fun of dreams and said it's all nonsense. How can these two be reconciled? Okay, so the key to reconciling these apparently conflicting Talmudic excerpts lies in the following passage, which we're going to ask Tiffany, please, to read for us. Text 8, which contrasts two biblical verses about dreams. Tiffany, don't forget to unmute yourself, and when you can, please read for us text 8, angels and demons.
Angels and demons. Rava raised a contradiction between two verses. In one verse, God says, I speak with the prophet in a dream. But a second verse states, dreams speak falsely. The Talmud resolves this. There are two types of dreams. Some come by means of an angel and some come by means of a demon.
And this is the one of the main points we would like to make today, which is this passage really explains that sometimes dreams are nonsense and sometimes dreams actually are to be taken seriously. The Talmud is saying that the verse that relates dreams to prophecy is speaking of dreams that come from a holy, angelic source, while the verse that dismisses dreams as nonsense is speaking of dreams that come from a negative, demonic force, if you will. What exactly are angels and demons? So in lesson 4, we're really going to give a proper in-depth, we're going to tackle angels and demons properly. But for now, let's just start with a very basic definition as they're expressed in the context of dreams. And here's how it goes. Angels are positive spiritual forces. They occupy the heavenly realm where the soul rises when a person sleeps. More on that in just a moment. And demonic forces are the exact opposite. In other words, they're impure spiritual beings. And in the context of, hold on this for just a moment. More on demons in just a moment. But for now, just about angels. The Talmud tells us that when a Jew goes to sleep, his soul, or most of his soul, rises up above and kind of transcends his body and goes to a place in heaven where it then hangs out and is re-energized. This is why when we wake up in the morning, we say a prayer called Modeh Ani, right? Modeh Ani lefanecha melech chai v'kayim she'echazarta b'nishmati b'chemla rabba emunatecha. Thank you, Hashem, for returning my soul with mercy into my body. But there's another element to that. Come again?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought somebody said something. Okay. But there's another element to that prayer which I'd like to read to you, which is every morning, that's the prayer we say before we even wash our hands on our bed. We put our hands together. We thank Hashem for returning our soul to our body. But later on, we say a little of a longer prayer, and it goes a little something like this: Elokai, my God, neshama shnatata bi ta'orehi. The neshama which you have put in me is pure. And I'm not going to go through the whole prayer here, but basically we talk a little bit of the background of the neshama, and we say that when I go to sleep, my soul goes up to the heavens and becomes re-energized. This is literally the source for why you wake up in the morning and you feel fresh, even if you went to sleep the night before and you felt exhausted. Why? Because the soul is injected with new energy. Now, there is an area geographically, spiritually on the map where the soul goes and hangs out. And that area is not vacant. It's not an empty white space. It's not a physical space, obviously, but it's not an empty space. There are angels or positive forces that hang out there. And in the most beautiful description, the previous Chabad Rebbe, our Rebbe's father-in-law, describes this area. And Nicole, if I can ask you to read it for us, please, in text 9. The heavenly palace.
Okay, let me scroll.
Page
Text
21.
9.
Yeah.
Got it. At a certain time during sleep, souls rise up to the heavenly academy, each soul going to the hall it is associated with. In general terms, the location in the heavenly palace where a person's soul rests at night is commensurate with the spiritual stature they have achieved with their daytime divine service. More specifically, if a person observed a mitzvah, studied Torah, or prayed in a more beautiful and complete manner that day, or went to sleep with words of thoughts of Torah on their mind, they merit a loftier location in heaven. The heavenly palace contains hallways, colonnades, lounges, and halls in which the soul can rest when it rises to heaven to draw new life during sleep.
So the halls of the heavenly palace, thank you, Nicole, are where the soul rests during sleep, right? And those halls are roamed by angels. The Zohar describes it for us. Nicole, can you keep going for us, please? Text 10. The Zohar describes these angels.
Okay. While a person sleeps, the soul rises to the level of the holy angels and receives certain information, learns new things, and then returns to its place. This is an experience of connection to holiness.
Thank you. So when the Talmud tells us that dreams are 1/60th of prophecy, this is what the Talmud is talking about. The Talmud is saying that if these angels communicate with you, because they're spiritual nature and their heightened awareness of godliness, angels are able to communicate the divine information to us. It's not quite prophecy, but it does bear some similarities to it because there's some form of communication that happens to us. And dreams that come from that source should obviously be taken seriously. But what about demons? Again, we're gonna tackle them more completely in lesson 4. But for now, we'll just talk about it as impure spiritual beings. And impure spiritual beings can really be looked at in 2 different ways. Some understand this as forces of impurity, but at least in the context of dreams, I would actually say, let's not be so negative about it. I would use it, as we'll see in text 11, as just a substitute for the silly imagination, products of the mind. And we're going to learn a lot more about why we call these demons shortly. Let's start with text 11. Phil, if I can ask you to read again for us, please.
False dreams are the product of an unhealthy, possessed imagination. The sages borrowed the term demon to describe this negative, destructive spirit that afflicts a person. Dreams from this source are meaningless, and one shouldn't be concerned about them at all.
So the Rashbats, who I mean, you can read more about him in the sidebar, but he was a pretty famous rabbi from the 1400s. It was a very, very well-versed rabbi, not just in Jewish topics, but also in, as you see, in philosophy and in poetry, and he was a physician, etc. I don't know why that's so common among the famous rabbis, is that they also had 3 or 4 different other personalities, but leaving that right, like Maimonides and the Rashba, Rabbi Shlomo ben Aderet, etc. But leaving that aside for a moment, the Rashbat says, don't be so, by demons here, what we mean is psychological demons. In other words, these are mental demons that possess or haunt a person. And this will feel very relatable, I think, to all of us that have had dreams when we have been stressed out, right? Let's take that example of the driving test again. What happens? During the day, your mind is wandering and thinking all sorts of negative thoughts. And maybe you're even pretty good about pushing those negative thoughts out of your head. But as we know, subconsciously, you're nervous about it, right? How often does it happen that you lose your patience or you're cool with someone, with your spouse, with your children, whatever it is, and it takes you till 20 minutes later to realize, actually, the reason why I've been so on edge is because of a driving test that I have coming up, or whatever. Insert whatever is stressing you out instead of the driving test, right? I have an audit for my company or whatever it is coming up, and that's really what's stressing me out, and that's why it's affecting all these other things. And I thought I had successfully pushed that out of my mind because I'm home with my family, but it turns out it's bubbling to the surface in terms of the stress that we have. Now imagine when your soul goes up to heaven, and your conscious discipline, if you will, over your mind is a little more relaxed. These demons, so to speak, right? Again, we're not talking about negative demons, forces of impurity that we're going to introduce in lesson 4. Says the Rashbat, you can look at them as very simply. Your imagination are the demons of your mind. In other words, when a person doesn't have control over their mind, then these demons come and rise to the surface. And so back to that Talmudic contradiction, these two verses, right? We can resolve them very simply. If a dream comes from the imagination, those are dreams that speak falsehood. And if dreams come from angels, so then those dreams are miniature prophecies. And even then, some information is false. As we said, it's only 1/60th of prophecy. It's not exactly as direct as prophecy is. Okay. So this, I think, successfully answers the academic question that we had, which is, we had two Talmudic source texts, and this is how dreams work. And if you guys were a whole bunch of dream engineers, I think you would have your answers as to how dreams work. The problem is, nobody here is a dream engineer. And the real question we all came here for is, what about my dream, right? Well, because so far, even though we have a whole explanation as to how dreams work, if you were to wake up tomorrow morning with a dream and based on this lesson try and interpret it, you'd be just as lost. You don't know if it's from an angel or from a demon or from your imagination or from, right? We're not spiritual engineers, right? So we wouldn't know. So here I think, but I do think that the first half of the lesson was very important in order to set the stage for where we're going to go. But now we'd like to try and answer the question of how can we identify the source of a dream and assess how seriously it can be taken. This is like your origin movie on your dreams, right? You're looking for what's the origin story of my dream? Where does it come from, right? What's its background? So let's break this down regarding different types of dreams. Many dreams we have aren't calling us to any action. Okay, like I think the best way to go through this is by process of elimination. Many dreams that we have are not calling us to any action. They're just simple visions. Either it's something that's stuck in our minds, or even if it's from an angel, doesn't make a difference. A common example, for example, is seeing deceased family members or friends in a dream and interacting with them. But there's no call to action. It's not like they're telling you, go here, there's a treasure buried, or don't do this, don't board the Titanic. No, just simple dreams. I think those dreams are fairly simple on a practical level. They're not so relevant. They are just visions, and we should enjoy them. We can choose to see it as meaningful and heartwarming if we wish, or we can choose to just ignore it as a figment of our imagination. But on an emotional level, the question still interests us. Is there any way to know whether or not the dream was meaningful, right? But for the most part, there's no practical. I think for the main focus that we should try to invest our energy in is in the second category, which is the practically relevant dreams, the treasure map dreams, if you will, right? The dreams where we're being told to act one way or another, and we need to decide, do I board the Titanic or do I not board the Titanic? Do I go in search of the treasure or do I not? Even more than that, do I choose to understand that the treasure that I found, or whatever, the inheritance that I found based on a dream, is my Sheni or not? How do we practically apply that? Perhaps most pressingly, what if I saw something in a dream that scared me about what lies ahead in my future? Should I take this seriously and now engage in actual actions in the real world, fasting, repentance, and doing things to, or should I just treat it as a nightmare? Move on, ignore it, and move on. So there are two general approaches to this question in rabbinic literature, and the first comes from the same Rashbats that we were just mentioning earlier. Ron, you said you're not up to reading, right? But Leah, if we can ask you please to read for us, text 12, Navigating Doubt.
So I don't have the text.
Oh, sorry, I'm sorry about that. You mentioned that before, and I totally forgot. Elise, if we can ask you please to read for us.
Okay. We have reconciled the sage's teaching and reached a logical conclusion that some dreams are valid and should be taken seriously, while others are meaningless and should be ignored. We are now left with the question of how to relate to a specific dream. How are we to know if it is valid or meaningless? The general rule in any situation of doubtful ownership is to leave the item in question in the hands of the person who currently possesses it. This is why the Talmud stated that the person who had a dream pointing to the location of a Meiser Sheni inheritance should disregard his dream, leaving the money under his full ownership as it had been prior to the dream. Dreams are irrelevant as far as taking money out of the possession of its owner.
Thank you. So the Rashbat is essentially telling us one thing. He says, back to this slide for a moment. He says, we're not sure, right? Every dream is in doubt. We don't know if it's imagination or if it's from angels. We don't know if it's just something to be treated as nonsense, or if it's something that we should actually take seriously. So he says the whole thing can be summed up in one word: caution. What does caution tell you to do, right? So when it comes to a situation like money, and you're not sure which way the money should go, right? Caution tells you, leave the money where it is. Don't change the status of the money based on a dream, because you don't know for sure that there's any real validity to changing it. So unless you have further information, or you can investigate it and find the further information, you shouldn't change the status of the money. But when it comes to other things, such as, for example, the fact that we're nervous about what's going to be in the future, caution tells me you may as well take on another mitzvah. You may as well fast and repent and try to sweeten the dream, if you will. And so that's the Rashbat's approach. Okay. I mentioned there were two approaches in rabbinic literature. Here comes the second one. The second one comes to us from the Alter Rebbe, which is the first Chabad Rebbe. And he actually gives us a formula to resolve at least some of the doubt that, in other words, the Rashbat says, treat the whole thing as if it's in doubt. And therefore, your approach is caution, right? Like, so for example, if someone were to come to the Rashbats and tell them that I dreamt that there's a treasure buried somewhere, Rashbats would say, listen, it's still in doubt. We don't know if it was imagination or angels. You were dreaming about treasure. You just watched Pirates of the Caribbean, and now you're dreaming about treasure buried on some island somewhere. So we don't know if it's that, or we don't know if it's something serious, because you also had a loved one who just passed away and might have left you a treasure somewhere, and they're the ones who came into you in a dream and told you about it. So listen, it's in doubt. Caution tells you, are you interested in pursuing it? Go, check it out. Meaning in a situation where there's nothing to lose. Go, check it out. It might be true, it might not be. That's the approach that the Rashbat takes. But the Alter Rebbe says, let's go back, right? Take it up a notch, back to where it says the dreamer is in doubt. We're still not sure if it comes from imagination or angels. The dreamer is in doubt. He says, let's try to resolve some of that doubt. And the key, says the Alter Rebbe, is assessing the spiritual nature of the dreamer. This is a really cool approach. It's very different type of approach. Stop looking at the dream. Stop thinking so much about the dream and the communication that happened. Let's talk about you, because that's a very important fact. And even you, let's talk about the state that you find yourself in currently in terms of your spiritual status. So the Alter Rebbe's communication comes to us in a writing from his grandson, who talks about what his grandfather told him. And Nicole, Tiffany, if I can ask you to read for us, please. Where is she? There she is, unmute. Text 13 on page 27. Who is dreaming?
27, who is dreaming? I heard explicitly from my grandfather and teacher of blessed memory that one should not be worried at all about such matters like dreams. The teachings in the Talmud that lend great significance to dreams only apply to people of great spiritual stature whose thoughts are distant from these matters. If this person has an uncharacteristic experience, it must be divinely orchestrated, and it is therefore cause for concern. However, a person whose thoughts regularly wander to such matters has no reason for concern. My grandfather repeated this many times and would dismiss people that were miserable as a result. You should completely ignore this and be joyful.
So the Alter Rebbe says, let's talk about the dreamer. He says, a mentally focused and spiritual individual who's in control of all of his thoughts, right, throughout the day. Somebody like that, their mind doesn't wander aimlessly. So, and all of their conscious thoughts are meaningful. And it's therefore reasonable to assume that their nighttime dreams are also meaningful and not just a product of a wandering imagination. This is certainly the case if a person has an alarming dream which tells of a negative future. These matters are distant from what their conscious mind contemplates during the day. So where would it come from if it's not coming from what they were thinking about during the day? So therefore, it's very possible that it contains valid information. We should be worried about it, and we should act upon it. So says the Alter Rebbe, when the Talmud tells us that there were people who would fast and repent, who was it talking about? It was talking about these spiritually self-disciplined people. People who every single thought they thought throughout the day, they never caught themselves by surprise thinking about something, right? We all had that experience, right? You're like, oh, I didn't realize I was thinking about that, right? Like halfway through, you realize you were thinking about something. They never had experiences like that. Why? Because they were focused and spiritually elevated people. Now, of course, even for such spiritual giants, there is an element of doubt, right? Because even if it is a full-fledged communication, as we said, there's always a level of nonsense to a dream. There's always it's only 1/60th of prophecy. It's not a direct communication; it's an indirect communication, which is why we see that even by Joseph, a certain degree of his dream was nonsense. Joseph was certainly a spiritually elevated person. This is the reason why, when it comes to halacha says leave the money where it is. Why? Because regardless of how convincing the dream is, in order to affect ownership, we need certainty. No dream can ever meet that bar, even if it is a holy and spiritual person. No dream can ever meet the bar of certainty, which should make money move from step 1 to step 2. You know how money moves from step 1 to from person A to person B from a Jewish perspective? Witnesses, as the Torah tells us, al pishnayim edim yakum davar. Documents, as the Torah tells us that there are documents that are necessary, right? Documents about loans. These are real ways, the concrete ways that money transfers hands. We don't transfer hands based on anything less than 100% certainty, at least certainty as it is achieved in the Torah. But now let's go back to people like us. Another person whose mind is wandering all over the place, right? Even during the day, forget when they're at night and their imagination is roaming, right? Even during the day, their mind is roaming all over the place. In all likelihood, the source of such a person's dreams is in their own wandering mind and not meaningful communication. And this is where the most important takeaway from the Alter Rebbe's perception perspective takes us. Why? You see, because at first glance, you think to yourself, this helped me nothing. Why? I'm not a spiritually elevated person. I don't control my mind to such a degree to be able to say with certainty that this didn't come from the wandering of my mind. So how can I know? Says the Alter Rebbe, if you're not someone like that, you're almost guaranteed that it's from the wandering of your mind. So much so, what was the last paragraph that Tiffany read for us? My grandfather repeated this many times. I would dismiss people that were miserable as a result. People who had very negative dreams, people that were taking these things very seriously. The Alter Rebbe would dismiss it and say, listen, are you somebody whose mind is so focused that you really believe that everything you dream comes from some sort of communication from the divine? No. So then you have nothing to worry about. It's most likely your wandering mind. Some have pointed out, I thought this was a very, very powerful point. Now, when I say some have pointed out, I'm quoting now from a book that's called Piskei Teshuvot. I think I have it at home, I guess, not here. But Piskei Teshuvot is a collection of works from the past 150 years of responsa of rabbis that have answered questions in these days. And there seems to be a consensus among them that in today's day and age, this whole concept of the wandering mind that the Alter Rebbe introduced 300 years ago really becomes exaggerated. Think about it. If 300 years ago, the Alter Rebbe is, I don't want to say laughing, but he's making light of people that are taking themselves and their dreams too seriously. Think about people like us. Our minds don't just wander, but our minds are constantly stimulated. In today's day and age, are you kidding me? Think about advertisements, television, smartphones, social media, etc. Right? If you have a dream, there's a chance that it might be, you know from where? Let me show you from where. This is Facebook, right? You're scrolling through Facebook, and we all know this, right? We all know this social media. You're scrolling, and then you land on something. Oh, this is actually a good thing to land on. And then you land on the rabbi's advertisement for Jewpernatural. And that's when you stop and you read. What do you think? The rest of it didn't go into your mind? Of course it did. It just entered into the subconscious, and it might not be affecting you now. When you're sleeping, all these things bubble up. What about the fact that as you were driving 150 miles, or how many miles is it, Tiffany, from all the way up north down to here, right? What about when you're driving 500 miles down south and you pass literally 500 billboards along the way? You can't repeat a single one to me, but do you know how much stimuli we have all the time in today's day and age? The wandering mind becomes exaggerated 1,000 times fold. Says the Alter Rebbe, rest assured, for the most part, if you experience something negative in a dream, dismiss it as your wandering imagination. Now, while a mind wanderer or bad dream is not valid enough to justify any extreme actions like fasting, there is a step that can be taken to counter them that doesn't hamper regular life. In other words, it's not something you're going to need to worry about fasting on Shabbat, etc. And that is a particular prayer. Okay, there is a prayer. It's a prayer for dreams that normally in regular life we only say 3-4 times a year. We say it whenever the Kohanim, the priests, are blessing us, which is on Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Passover, and Shavuot. That's about 5 times a year. When the priestly blessing happens, we've all been in shul when that happens, right? The priests go up to the front, Yevarechecha, right, and they bless us. While we're receiving that blessing, it's considered a very special, elevated time. And as a result, there's a prayer that we ask for. And it happens to be, it's all about dreams. And Nicole, I'm going to ask you to read it for us, please. It's text 14. Dream transformation.
Okay, Ribono Shalom.
This is the prayer, literally directly out of the siddur, lifted from the siddur.
A master of the universe, I am yours, and my dreams are yours. I have dreamed a dream, and I do not know what it is. May it be your will, my God and the God of my fathers, that all my dreams concerning myself or concerning any other Jew shall be for the good. Whether dreams I dreamed about others, or whether about myself, or whether others dreamed about me. If they are good dreams, strengthen them and reinforce them, and may they be fulfilled in me and in them, like the dreams of Yosef. But if they require remedy, heal them, like Hezekiah, king of Judah, from his illness, like Miriam the prophetess from her leprosy, like Naaman from his leprosy, like the waters of Marah by Moses, and like the waters of Jericho by Elisha. As you change the curse of the wicked, Balaam, from a curse into a blessing, so shall you change all my dreams concerning myself and concerning all of Israel for good, to good. Guard me, be gracious to me, and favor me.
Thank you, Nicole. It's a beautiful prayer that we usually only say a number of times a year, but actually there are multiple places where rabbis have given advice to people who experience a particular negative dream. There is a time during the morning prayer, during the repetition of the Amidah at shul, the same time as the priestly blessing is being said, not blessed by the Kohanim, because on a regular day we don't do that, but every single day we say the priestly blessing, not we. The Chazan says it during the repetition of the Amidah. In other words, the cantor, the leader of the prayer, says it during the repetition of the Amidah. And at that same time, as he's doing that, and as he's saying the following prayer, which is Sim Shalom, the end of the repetition of the Amidah, would be a great time to say the same prayer if a person had a negative dream and they don't want to wait until one of these holidays when we do this. So that's a good time to do it. Now, this changes the way that the Alter Rebbe would take a look at this graph, which we have on page 31 or on the screen in front of you. So we figured out that the academic difference between imagination and angels, right? Imagination, dreams speak falsehood. Angels, dreams are miniature prophecies. Beautiful. But when it comes to a scenario of wandering minds, says the Alter Rebbe breaks it down into one more layer. When it comes to a scenario of wandering minds, we don't grant permission to fast on Shabbat. Don't take it seriously. Move on. But when for people that are not wandering minds, people that are focused spiritual people, for them permission is granted to fast on Shabbat. Okay, and regardless of these two, says the Alter Rebbe, the money always stays with the possessor. It's not a 100% certainty that we're going to use it in order to change something. Okay. Since the assumption is that most of us on this Zoom are mind wanderers, I hope nobody takes that term offensively. To the best of my knowledge, it hasn't been entered in the non-PC terms that we're not allowed to say anymore, right? I can call you all mind wanderers and I won't be canceled, right? So since I'm going to assume that everybody on this Zoom, like myself, are mind wanderers, there is one more genre of dream that I want to talk about, which makes a lot of sense to treat as genuine, even for the wanderer. And that is, if the dream is inviting us or teaching us to be a better Jew in a productive way. Let's say you have a dream, and a deceased loved one comes to you in a dream. And we're going to talk much more, by the way, about communicating with loved ones that have been deceased in following lessons. But for now, just very simply. And they're encouraging us to go to shul. They're encouraging us to put on tefillin. They're encouraging us to do a mitzvah. I think you see where this is leading. What do you have to lose? What do you have to lose? Nothing. You don't have anything to lose. Sure, go ahead. Now, if this is going to start to affect other people and you're going to start to do things to other people, that's all of a discussion. You have no right to start treating a dream as true when it comes to other people. When it comes to yourself, if this is inspiring for you, if it's meaningful and this inspires you to be a better person that day, absolutely go ahead. And this is actually an interesting, this leads me to an interesting letter of the Rebbe, which is text 15, a letter from our Rebbe, in which the Rebbe basically says the following. A fellow comes to him and he has a dream, and the Rebbe goes on to dream interpretation for him. Now, I can't do dream interpretation. I'll leave that to the Rebbe, right? But essentially what the Rebbe is telling him is, if this dream is a positive message for you, go for it. Run with it. Phil, can you read it for us, please? Text 15. I'll give a drop of background what the person wrote to the Rebbe. He said that he had a dream in which he was angry about the injustice in the world, and he said to himself in the dream that considering this state of affairs, he needs to ascend from here. In other words, he needs to move, probably geographic locations. Either way, listen to the way the Rebbe interprets the dream. Text 15. Phil, when you're ready.
As a general rule, there is no need for instructions to be communicated through dreams. For instruction, God gave each and every one of us the Torah of truth and life, which illuminates a Jew's path in life. When one isn't observing God's instructions given in the Torah, one may sometimes receive a hint regarding this in a dream or the like. It is certain that the message of your dream is not about injustices in the world in the literal sense, for such issues are completely beyond your ability to rectify. Rather, the straightforward meaning of your dream is clear. You're being shown that you need to be angry about the fact that your world, your personal life that you exercise full control over, is being conducted unjustly contrary to divine justice. You must ascend from this mode of conduct through actual day-to-day behavior in accordance with God's instructions as stated in the Code of Jewish Law.
Says the Rebbe, let's do two things here. Number one, let's lay down some cardinal rules. Number one is, let's remember where our instruction comes from. We've never taken instruction from dreams. Our instruction comes from the Torah and the mitzvot. Now, you're telling me that this dream happens to be talking about something positive? No problem. Let's interpret it positively. When you say you see injustice in the world, interpret it as your personal world. That you see injustice in your world. There's things that need to be corrected in your world. And if you need to ascend, that means that you should elevate to a new spiritual level. In other words, the Rebbe says, treat this as you would with any other moment in your life. Inspiration that's helping you to become good, right? That's helping you to be a good person based on the Torah and the mitzvah. Now, in general life, if we have one person in our life, and sometimes they inspire us, and they do good things for us, and sometimes they beat us down and they have negative messages for us, what do? We ignore the negative messages, and we take the lessons from them and the inspiration from them, and we try to move on with it, right? We take the good, leave the bad. Says the Rebbe, do the same thing with the dream. If the dream is inspirational, in other words, for people that have wandering minds, and we don't know, maybe there's a slight chance that it comes from somewhere inspirational, says there, but no problem. If it's a dream that hampers you, disregard it. If it's a dream that inspires you, internalize it and actually allow it to make you into a better person. Okay. So we've learned two very practical approaches towards dreams. And the approach of the Alter Rebbe gave us some clarity that how we should react to dreams that we already had. It's okay, we can disregard them, they're negative, leave it aside. It's most likely from your imagination. But is there any way, right? None of us want to have these dreams. What about nightmares? None of us want to have negative dreams. What can we do to avoid or at least reduce the occurrence of frightening nightmares? So first of all, I want to share a really cool, this is not in this in this lesson, but there is a handwritten response that the Rebbe gave to a woman. It was in the year after the previous Rebbe's passing. And the Rebbe actually encouraged her. The Rebbe said like that. She was suffering from nightmares. The Rebbe said she should keep a picture of the previous Rebbe, tzaddikim, their faces, holy, righteous people, their faces have an immense power, even after they pass from this world. And the Rebbe said she should keep a picture of the previous Rebbe near her bed, and this will help. She should look at it right before she goes to sleep, and this will help to avoid nightmares. So if anybody's looking for a direct antidote, that might be a good thing to do. But there is probably the two most important things that in our Jewish culture, in our Jewish traditions, are the most directly associated with being protected from nightmares and negative dreams, come to us in text 16, and the Rebbe summarizes them for us beautifully. Elise, can you read them for us, please? We're on page 35, text 16.
Regarding disturbing dreams, it is well known, and the sages teach about this, that people only see in their dreams the products of their own thoughts. Dreams are the result of idle daytime thoughts, and when the cause is reduced, the result will automatically be minimized. You should be particular about reciting the bedtime Shema and ensure that the mezuzah of your bedroom is kosher.
Says the Rebbe, in terms of a general attitude towards dreams, there is, first of all, you see the Rebbe right here echoing the Alter Rebbe immediately, talking about the fact that they should be disregarded. But if you want to avoid them coming to you, if you want to reduce nightmares, there's a few things you could do. Number one is exert greater control of your daytime thoughts. Try to actually think positive thoughts throughout the day. Number two is you can recite the bedtime Shema. And number three is ensure the bedroom has a kosher mezuzah. I want to talk about each of these one at a time. Exerting greater control over daytime thoughts is a conversation that really goes way beyond today's lesson. And that's because from a Jewish perspective, especially from a Hasidic perspective, control over one's thoughts is a takes tremendous exertion. And also, at the same time, we are told that it is completely within our reach. In Tanya, when the Alter Rebbe talks about the three ways that we interact with the world, which are thought, speech, and action, the Alter Rebbe says every single one of them falls under the category of the verse in the Torah. Ki karov elecha hadavar me'od, that the thing is close to you. This idea is very close to you. Beficha uvavavcha la'asoto, in your mouth and in your heart to do so. In other words, three things: your mouth, speech, in your heart, your thoughts. La'asoto, to do it. Thought, speech, and action. These three can be controlled by a human being with minimal effort, says the Alter. But that's number one. So therefore, if you're thinking to yourself, my mind wanders all the time, try to come up with ways to control your thoughts a little more, especially when they're negative thoughts. Another one of the Chabad Rebbes, the Tzemach Tzedek, used to tell us, Tracht gut vet sein gut, that when we think positive thoughts, we actually create better results for ourselves, both in the physical world and certainly in our dreams. Okay. But let's move on to number two, reciting the bedtime Shema. And really, this is going to be my focus. Let's move on to number three first. Ensure your bedroom has a kosher mezuzah. I cannot stress this enough. Many people have the mistaken notion that the mitzvah of mezuzah is just to have one on the front of the house and that suffices for the entire house. That is not the case. The mitzvah of mezuzah is to have one on every single room of the house, so long as it is more than 4 amot by 4 amot, or 4 cubits by 4 cubits. It's about a 6-foot square radius. If the room is larger than that, it needs a mezuzah, as long as it's not a bathroom or a shower, or a room that's disrespectful for a mezuzah to be in, because we go in there without clothing. And not just that, but we should check our mezuzot. We should get our mezuzot checked once every 5, 6, 7 years, whatever it is, especially if it's somewhere that's hot or damp, or the house in the desert or a house in the snow, right? So it can easily be ruined by something. So then for sure we should have them checked every couple years, specifically twice every 7 years. The Shulchan Aruch, the Jewish Code of Law, tells us twice every 7 years. Okay, so that's the first point and the last point. But I want to take a moment today to focus on the middle point, reciting the bedtime Shema. This is a very, very ancient Jewish custom. It's a mitzvah in the Torah to say Shema before we go to sleep at night. And over time, this mitzvah has evolved to not just be about a mitzvah saying Shema Yisrael, etc., before we go to sleep, but also to be a time for what is known as cheshbon hanefesh, an accounting of the soul. Okay, beautiful. Now, this mitzvah, or this practice, becomes especially important because it really works on two of the points that we mentioned today, which cause nightmares. Number one is that during the bedtime Shema, one of the things that we do is we make an accounting of the soul. We think about the day. It's a mini meditation, if you will, where we go through the day and we think, what did I do today that needs correction? Things that I did today that weren't so great. And what did I do today that perhaps can be corrected? that can perhaps I can grow in the way that I am. So that's a great time to think about exerting control over your daytime thoughts, and probably most importantly, specifically the negative thoughts. And I'd like to read to you. It's not on the cards that I gave you, or if you didn't get it yet, you're getting it. It's not on these Shema cards that I gave you, but there's one more paragraph. The bedtime Shema is probably like 3-4 pages long in the siddur. I don't have a blue siddur handy, but I know a lot of you have the blue siddur. I wish I could tell you what page it's on. I don't know. It's probably like 130 something, 139, maybe 140, somewhere around there. The bedtime, the prayer before retiring at night. On this card, we put 2 paragraphs. One is, of course, the Shema, which you're all familiar with. And then we added a 2-liner on the bottom. Biyadcha afkid ruchi padita oti Adonai elamet. I entrust my spirit into your hand. You will redeem me, Lord God of truth. Right? And then on the back, we put what's known as the Hamapil prayer. Okay? Elise, can you read it for us, please? The Hamapil prayer. Because I think this really talks about the idea that our soul is about to ascend to a spiritual state where it might receive messages, and we want those messages to be positive. Elise, if you can unmute, please, and you can read for us, please, the Hamapil prayer.
Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who causes the bonds of sleep to fall upon my eyes and slumber upon my eyelids, who gives light to the people of the eye, light to the apple of the eye. May it be your will, Lord my God and God of my fathers, to let me lie down in peace and to raise me up to a good life and peace. Let my thoughts not trouble me, nor bad dreams, nor sinful fancies, and may my bed be perfect before you. Give light to my eyes, lest I sleep the sleep of death. Blessed are you, Lord, who in his glory gives light to the whole world.
And this is one of the most important blessings we can make before we go to sleep. It's after the Shema. It's at the end of the bedtime prayer. And essentially what we're asking God is like this. By the way, many people, the custom is they say this blessing right before they go to sleep, and they don't talk after this before they fall asleep, because they want this to be the last thing they say before they go to sleep. So this is literally as your eyelids are closing, you just quickly say it. For example, I know it by heart. So what is the purpose of this prayer? The purpose of this prayer is, listen, I'm going to sleep. I'm asking God that I shouldn't have nightmares. I'm giving you my soul, we tell God. I'm entrusting you with my soul. Into your hands I entrust my soul. Right? That was the 2-liner from the other side of the page. And what we're essentially telling God is, do me a favor. Take care of my soul. Watch over my soul. And even if I might not be deserving of it, make sure that that negative thoughts don't enter my imagination while I am sleeping. So that's one thing we can do to avoid nightmares. Another thing we can do to avoid nightmares is, like we said, controlling our daytime thoughts. And a lot of times that means processing what we went through during the day. If you do have a siddur in front of you, I'm going to read now the first paragraph of the prayer before retiring at night. Again, like I told you, it's got to be on page 140 something. I don't know the exact page. And we open up with a prayer that goes like this. Master of the universe. And what we're going to do here is, what we're going to do here in this prayer is, we're going to talk about the relationships we had throughout the day, which are usually the cause of the most angst in our lives. And we're going to attempt to come to terms on our own with those relationships. What do we say to God? We say, Master of the universe, I hereby forgive anyone who has angered or vexed me, or sinned against me, either physically or financially, against my honor or anything else that is mine, whether accidentally or intentionally, inadvertently or deliberately, by speech or by deed, in this incarnation or in any other. Any Israelite, may no man be punished on my account. May it be your will, Lord my God and God of my fathers, that I shall sin no more, nor repeat my sins, neither shall I again anger you, nor do what is wrong in your eyes. The sins that I have committed erase in your abounding mercies, but not through suffering or severe illness. May the words of my mouth and meditation of my heart be acceptable before you, Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. I want to talk to you about how powerful this is. Very often we don't realize it, but we come to bedtime and we're about to go to sleep. We're about to let our minds wander literally in the most uncontrolled manner. And what do we come with? Baggage. So much baggage from the day. I spoke to this one and I was a little offended by that one and what this person said to me, what that person said to me, etc. And I know that one of the things we think we need is for everybody else to forgive us, right? What can I do? This person, I must have said something terrible to that person, so that person has to forgive me, right? I can't control that. But you know what you can control? and possibly something that ends up bothering our dreams and ends up being a bigger source of anxiety for us, what we can do is we can forgive others. Forgiveness is often misunderstood as something that has to be earned by someone else, and even more often misunderstood as something that even needs to be communicated to someone else. It's beautiful and it's wonderful if you communicate forgiveness to someone else. But the first step is in your mind forgiving the person. Before you even garner up the courage to go over to that person and say, I know that you did something terrible to me, and I said I would never forgive you, but now I'm forgiving you. Before you even get there, the first thing is to let go of that baggage. Because the main person that's suffering from you not forgiving someone else is you. Why? Because you walk around with this terrible feeling towards other people. And so then you come to sleep and you expect that you're going to have these nice, pleasant, floating on cloud kind of dreams. Of course not. If your dreams are affected by what you thought about during the day, you need to work on what you were feeling during the day and sort through those emotions. And often we don't even take the time to do that. What do? We lay down in bed, right? We all have this wonderful television screen in front that helps us to really stay focused, right? We turn it on and we fall asleep watching whatever your favorite TV show is. You haven't even taken a moment to sort through your thoughts throughout the day. Of course, when you sleep, they're going to come bubbling back up. They don't disappear. But if we take some time before we go to sleep to read a paragraph like this and say, before anything else, I forgive everyone else. And then you pause and you let your mind wander, this time in a controlled manner, to think about the people who might have angered or vexed you that day, right? Was that the exact language? I think it was, right? I hereby forgive anyone who has angered or vexed me. And you think about the people who have done that. And you let go of it and you say, it's fine. Doesn't bother me anymore. I'm over it. I'm done with it. Right? And you learn to let go of that baggage. Then you say a prayer then you say the Shema, of course. And then you say a prayer like Hamapil, right? Literally asking God we shouldn't have nightmares. This is literally, I think, out of these three, that one is the most effective to reduce nightmares or negative dreams. But it's the three together that if we're looking to have more pleasant dreams and to have dreams that are more meaningful, these are the most effective tools. So my challenge to you, obviously get your mezuzah checked, obviously do as much work as you can to control your thoughts. But take this card home, or better yet, use the siddur. And from now on, every night before you go to sleep, take 5 minutes. You can say it in the Hebrew. It's got it in the phonetics on it. You can say it in the English. Very meaningful. Say the Shema. Say the two-liner, Biyadcha Afkid, right? I entrust my spirit into your hand. You will redeem me, Lord God of my truth. And then say Hamapil. By the way, for those of you that are interested, growing up in religious homes, these are the first words that we teach children. In other words, my children, from when they were 3 days old, I said all of these words with them. Not the full bedtime Shema, just the ones that are on this card. From beginning to end, and they all know it by heart already. My two children know them by heart already because we say them every single night before they go to sleep. In fact, I'm so certain of it that last night when we had this event by us, and we left the children with a babysitter, I said to her, don't worry, the children know Shema. You just tell them to say it. They'll say it and they'll teach you. I'm not sure if the babysitter knew the whole Shema or not, but either way, they'll help you say the Shema with them. And with this, we conclude lesson one of our new course, Jewpernatural. And please turn your attention to the video screens for a brief overview of today's lesson.
Lesson 1. Dreams and direction. 1. The degree of meaning our dreams have correlates with the degree of focus and meaning our daytime thoughts have. People who think with more intentionality have more meaningful dreams. And people whose minds roam without focus experience meaningless dreams. 2. Even if a dream has meaning, not all of its details are accurate or meaningful. Dream interpretation is far from an exact science and can never be considered certain. 3. As a rule, dreams that cause worry and anxiety should be disregarded as meaningless. When dreams do have meaning, their goal is to inspire us to act and improve ourselves. 4. There is no destiny that cannot be changed. Even if we're convinced that a particular dream forebodes negative events, we should know that prayer and mitzvot can change any destiny. 5. Nightmares can be reduced through improving the quality of our daytime thoughts. firm faith in God and a Jewish bedtime ritual are particularly effective in setting the stage for a peaceful and refreshing sleep experience.
Thank you all for joining us for Lesson 1, Dreams and Direction. Please join us next week as we dive into the stars and signs in Lesson 2.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
you.